The Supreme Court of India on Thursday ruled that a high-power committee will be formed constituting the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition in the Lok Sabha and the Chief Justice of India to appoint the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners. The Election Commissioner of India and the Election Commissioners till date were appointed by the ruling party at the centre. For the last 73 years plus, this has been the norm, ladies and gentlemen. However, the Supreme Court's decision has taken away the solo decision, making the right and West the right to appoint the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha and, of course, the Chief Justice of India till the Parliament passes a law. The Constitution does not lay down a specific legislative process for the appointment of the CEC and the ECs. The President makes the appointment upon the advice of the Union Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. The decision by the Apex Court comes amid allegations that the Election Commission seemed to function with prejudice for the ruling party at the centre, considering they were the one who brought the Commissioner to power. Earlier, while hearing the bunch of petitions, during the course of the hearing, the central government came into the Supreme Court's firing line for neither framing a law that defines the process of appointment of the election commissioners, nor laying down the eligibility criteria for their appointment. The top court spoke out on the need to insulate the Chief Election Commissioner's office against political pressures. Now, during the course of the hearing on the matter, the government, arguing its position, had pushed back strongly against the court's inclination to devise any mechanism to appoint ECs and CEC. It called the court's suggestion to seek judiciary's help as fallacious and constitutionally impermissible. This is all during the course of the hearing. Let's go straight across to Abhishek Manu Singhvi ji, joining us, senior advocate, MP Rajya Sabha, member of the Congress party, also with us. Namaste, Jai Hind, good to have you with us, Abhishek Manu Singhvi ji, after a long time.
Namaskar, yes.
Your thoughts on the Supreme Court's judgment. Let's start from there. Where do you stand?
Anand, the right stand, on your right stand would be for all right-thinking persons to support, and I'm trying to be as non-political, apolitical as possible. Of course, you are bound to draw inferences because of the fact that I'm associated with the Congress. I believe it's a historic, indeed a momentous decision, not only because it has provided a bulwark, a foundation for independence, but because it has walked the talk. A lot of Supreme Court judgments may give a lot of sermons, a lot of didactic passages, but they don't walk the talk. Here there is a walking of the talk. And if you'll give me a couple of minutes more, Anand, let me tell you that, as you rightly said, this was strongly opposed by the government of the day. I understand that this has been the situation for the last 75 years, but there is a provision in Article 324 which says the Parliament by law, and therefore the court, the Apex Court, is entitled to legislate in the interstices by providing for this mechanism till such law as Parliament may ordain is enacted. That's the broad legal framework. So there's nothing legally infirm because there is a gap. Parliament has not enacted law, and the court is very careful in making this framework within the confines till such time as Parliament enacts the law. However, politically, I believe that, first of all, I believe genuinely that no government should support the making of a law reversing this framework. Second, I think it will be very difficult to find a consensus, even remotely, of passing a law which will change the basis of this judgment.
Right.
The reason is, yes, all governments have been complicit to some extent in not doing this law earlier, but I have no hesitation in saying, and I think if right-thinking people put their hand to their heart and speak objectively, there has been clearly a greater assault on institutions since the last 7-8 years. There has been a greater approach of control freak approach. There has been a greater approach of somehow directly, indirectly or otherwise being able to dictate to or control institutions. And therefore it is timely, it is apposite, and it must be supported and it must be opposed if laws are intended to be passed to reverse this. One last sentence, Anand. There is therefore imperative need that the one exception in today's polity, which is not governed by this. The Lokpal is governed by a similar framework, the NHRC is governed by a similar framework, the CBI has a similar framework, etc., etc. This is important that the ED is subjected to a similar framework. Regrettably, the government of India has passed a law in the reverse direction. not only extending by executive order the term of the ED head, but passing a very strange law saying we can extend it further for 5 years, but no more than 1 year at a time. A piecemeal extension is the antithesis of independence. It is intended to keep the person hanging and dependent upon you. It is intended for him to look upon you as the puppet master who will control the puppet. And that part should also, of course, it is not so in this judgment. I am proposing that it should also be subjected to a similar regime.
Jay, there are various aspects which I'd like to like your thoughts on. One is that why is it that the Parliament has deterred on forming a particular law on the construct and appointment, nature and appointment of the eligibility and appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner so far? So is it easy, or is it just getting away by broad brushing 73 years of inaction and blaming it all on the current disposition?
No, I did not. I am not starting by blaming the current disposition as far as non-enactment of law is concerned. I am blaming squarely the current disposition in increasing the gravity, the degree, the nature of the insidious intrusions on all institutions, including the EC. And let me make it good since we are talking only of EC. In 2019, Anand, and the electoral verdict was completely in favor of the BJP. No problem. I'm not on that. I'm giving your answer as to how I am, to what extent I am blaming it. The government of I was in fact in charge of that, and almost 25 or 24 complaints went to the EC in the heat and the dust of the 2019 elections. The EC broadly decided some 15, 17 of them, which were serious but not at the very top. And they either gave an order of restraint or they dismissed the complaint, but they did something. Because as you know, the election window is 6 to 8 weeks only. Unless you act promptly, you will get the fruits of your infraction. But in the 5 or 6 cases which involved the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Home Minister, the EC did a very strange thing. They decided not to decide either way. There was no decision. And as those 1 week became 2 and 2 became 3 and 3 became 4 and 4 became 6 weeks, we had to go to the Supreme Court saying that now it is virtually infructuous. The window of election punishment during the Model Code of Conduct is getting over. So the Supreme Court in the last few dying days of the election, before the polling, said, you better take a decision immediately. A decision came in favor of these two persons. There was a dissent, well known in the public domain. The dissent was not even allowed to be published. We applied in RTI and elsewhere to get the dissent. They said it's not our practice to give you a dissent. The person who, according to the government, perhaps had the temerity and the audacity to dissent, according to me, had the independence to dissent, was hounded and lampooned in the press subsequently for many weeks and ultimately left his post. Now, this is only an easy example. I'm not giving you other examples of other
We'll keep it in this domain. I just want to move on because there are other aspects too. The fact is that this has been blamed by whoever has been in the opposition against the government, whoever has been in power, of wanting to exercise absolute control. It's on record that the very same top court has called institutions like the CBI a caged parrot under other political dispositions. My question, Abhishek Manu Singhviji, is that in this case, it's a constitutional appointment. Should it not have remained in the realm of the executive? The moment the one of the third members is the Chief Justice of India or the CJI, the judiciary's interference, that's where many people are saying this is judicial overreach. The other aspect they are saying is that you are giving the CJI veto powers, because if the government and the LOP don't agree, the CJI then holds veto power. How is that fair?
I think that's the precise object. Each should have a veto power to an extent. And let me tell you that now you're asking a sanitized legal question, so it deserves a proper legal answer. If you say judicial overreach, the court has been very clear, very careful to steer clear of that charge. There is, if I had made a law saying Anand can be appointed only by 1, 2, 3, that might have been called a direct judicial legislation. The court has very carefully crafted by first pointing out Article 324, which says Parliament may by law. Then they've said, because Parliament has not stepped in by law, we are stepping in to fill the gap till such time as Parliament passes the law. Now, if you have the guts, if you have the consensus, if you have a all-party consensus in this, change the law. This judgment will stop operating.
Or draft a law, because there's no law at all. There's no law at all. Sorry. There's no law in the first place. So you have to first draft a law. There's no changing of the law.
Draft the law. You have to pass the law with a consensus, including in both houses. This is not a money bill. And I mean, I personally believe that there will be no consensus on this, but of course, a brute majority can ram it through. But I'm answering your other question, that the court has done naked judicial legislation. It has usurped legislative power. That is not right, because the juristic basis of this is Article 324(2), which people don't read, which empowers Parliament, and till such time as Parliament has come, the judiciary has utilized this gap.
But the fact is that if tomorrow, till the time a law is passed, there is a chief election commissioner appointed where the vote of the CJI or with the confidence of the CJI, and then there are complaints against that CEC, then will the court take action against somebody who's got the thumbs up or the approval of a former Chief Justice? That's one question.
Absolutely.
Or will there be a hesitance there? Secondly, if the judiciary, sir, my second part to it, and this is my final question, so you can answer both in either part. This is the first part. The second part is that if the judiciary itself is blamed of being opaque, not opening and not being transparent, then can it impose transparency on other bodies, be it the executive or the legislature?
See, you are of course expanding the debate, and you are rightly being the devil's advocate, perhaps departing from the right stand. But let me answer both the questions. The answer to your first question is yes, yes, and yes. The Chief Justice of India as a part of a selection process is absolutely nothing new. The Chief Justice of India sits on several other selection processes, including, if I recollect, Lokpal and NHRC. Secondly, the fact that I, in a panel of the Chief Justice of India, select you does not create any estoppel of any kind. If you do an infraction and then that infraction goes to court, there is no question of the fact that because you have the imprimatur of selection by the Chief Justice, the only effect it has is that the Chief Justice will not sit in on a bench which decides a judicial challenge either by you or against you.
The CJI will recuse himself or herself.
Thirdly, yes, the judiciary has lots and lots of problems. I am one of the fiercest critics of some of those problems, while being a very great admirer and supporter of the judiciary. And in that sense, I am an insider, outsider in all three organs. But the problem of the judiciary is not the issue we're discussing now. Let's have a panel discussion. I mean, let's have a discussion with you on the arrears, which is a major nightmare for the judiciary. Let's have a problem on the lack of a process for integrity decision. I'm prepared to speak on that. But the fact that that is there is no ground for criticizing this judgment. And let me end by saying one thing, Anand. It's an irony. Basic structure includes free and fair elections, democracy. The mega policeman for free and fair elections and democracy itself is therefore the EC. It is ironical that other bodies have a similar system which has now been put by this judgment, but the EC never had. So I would only pray that I hope and trust to God that the legislation, A, if it happens by the government, is not to the opposite direction, as was the case with ED. B, it will not be passed.
Well, we have to wait and see what happens if there is a law that is drafted and if that is brought over and if the legislature actually brings in a law which has not been there in effect in 75 years. But whatever happens, it's in continuum. So tomorrow, if governments change, parties who are in opposition come into power, they will still have to go through the same process as now spelled out by the courts, or what is then passed in Parliament as a law if a law is quickly enacted. Abhishek Manu Singhvi ji, thank you. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And yes, I will take you up on the aspect of judicial reforms, transparency of the judiciary itself, and accountability of the judiciary. On that, I will seek your time and we will speak at length very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's quickly go across, and we are now joined, and I think he's through with us, O.P. Rawat ji, former Election Commissioner of India. O.P. Rawat ji, namaste and Jai Hind. Thank you very, very much. Your response to the Supreme Court's judgment?
I think Supreme Court has only reiterated what was available in the Constitution, because Article 324, subclause 2 says that President shall appoint Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioner subject to any law enacted by the Parliament. Now, this law was not enacted by the Parliament for last 73 years, whereas this default provision of appointment by President continued. Supreme Court has only reiterated that either enact the law or you follow the panel which we are prescribing, so that there is a little pressure on government to enact a law.
But some may have jumped the gun, others may have, despite understanding the judgment, have said that there is an element of judicial overreach. Why bring in the CJI is a question that they have asked as far as the construct of the panel. Your thoughts on
it? If you go back in history, you will find that when this PIL was filed, just in that particular year, 2015, Law Commission in its 255th report suggested the same thing, that there should be a committee to select and for appointment to the Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commission. That is PM, leader of opposition or leader of the majority party of the Lok Sabha and the CJI. Another thing is that in 1990, wanted to amend the constitution by way of 70th constitutional amendment bill. At that time also they had suggested a sort of collision that appointment shall be made in consultation with chairperson of Rajya Sabha, speaker of Lok Sabha, and the leader of opposition.
LOP, G.
So there has been thinking on these lines, and there may be many permutation and combinations. In fact, Parliament is supreme, sovereign, and they can decide which permutation combination is acceptable to them.
But in this case, O.P. Rawatji, the question is that the the judiciary itself has been blamed of not being transparent. But here, in the election of a chief election commissioner, another constitutional post, the CJI could at times get veto power. How is that fair?
Of course, there is merit in your point, and in fact, another issue comes that any such executive action is also open to judicial review. Like last appointment of election commissioner, even that file was called by Honorable Supreme Court. Now, if CJI is a member of selection committee, then Supreme Court will be embarrassed in calling for such record and seeing as to what their CJI himself contributed there. So it is a little dicey and it may create embarrassing situation. But I think our parliament is really mature enough now after 75 years of independence, and we should have full faith in their wisdom.
Do you think therein lies the solution, that Parliament should draft a law, set the procedure for selection and put everything in place?
Yeah, why not? Because when Constitution was being drafted, there was a provision that the Chief Election Commissioner shall be appointed after ratification by 2/3 majority of the Parliament. And to drop that clause, this was added, that President shall appoint as a default provision till the law is enacted by Parliament. So therefore, the thinking has been in the minds of our lawmakers.
But do you believe this concept or allegation of judicial overreach, that the judiciary is assuming powers which make it overarching, and that's a trend, it's not healthy, it's dangerous? Should they also be open and transparent?
There are many instances where even the political parties want certain issues which are contentious and which will make them unpopular among the larger chunk of voters groups. They want that these issues should be best decided by the court, so that we are out of it.
Fair point.
Those instances are there, and whatever you mentioned, that judicial overreach in getting even executive decisions is also there. I personally feel that in a democracy and in a healthy democracy, these kind of issues will keep coming, and all the three organs, judiciary, legislature and executive, they should mature through these kind of instances where one appears to be encroaching on the other's turf, and they should be able to navigate through those issues successfully without damaging the democratic fabric.
You are actually saying that the judiciary, the executive and the legislature getting into each other's hairs, crosshairs time and again is actually an example of a vibrant democracy, not vice versa.
Yeah, true. It educates you and matures you to take on more serious issues, which may be, thrown by future challenges.
Ji. My final question, O.P. Rawatji, do you think the judiciary should also become transparent? Courts should open themselves up?
Actually, transparency is, the fulcrum of success of any vibrant democracy. And transparency should not be restricted to just one corner. Transparency in all walks of life, in all organizations which are instruments of governance. That is something which really makes democracy strong and vibrant, and I think whole country will look up to that.
Fair point made. Thank you for your short, sharp, candid opinion and answers. O.P. Rawatji, always a pleasure speaking with you. Namaste. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the other political story of the day, ladies and gentlemen. It is Congress MP Rahul Gandhi, who's gone to Cambridge to deliver a speech. Many people have turned around and said that what he has said borders on being very, very economical with the truth. It is less fact, more fiction. These questions are up in the air, but of course there is also plenty of politics over his claims. And many of those claims are also bordering on whether or not it would hurt the interest of our country. At a time when the G20 leadership is in Bharat, and at a time when nations are looking up to Prime Minister Narendra Modi and India to offer solutions to many, many geopolitical issues, including the Russia-Ukraine conflict. At a time when the world is saying India is on the rise and India is the shining star, we have an MP of the Lok Sabha who's standing on foreign soil and saying India is not a place to be and India is being blown through smithereens and democracy is in peril, and he's pointing to certain people sitting in the audience of certain backgrounds and saying they are in threat in our country, sparking off huge levels of criticism and politics. Let's look at some of the sharp attacks that have come from Mr. Rahul Gandhi. Now, here are the attacks that have come in the first place. What he has said, is it perspective or is it a propaganda? Many people would say that some would say it's perspective, other people would say it's just unidirectional political propaganda that's happening. Let's listen into what he had to say.
Indian democracy is under pressure, is under attack. We are facing an attack on the basic structure of Indian democracy. Large number of politicians have Pegasus on their phone. I've been called by intelligence officers who tell me, listen, please be careful what you're saying on the phone because we are sort of recording this stuff. So this is a constant pressure that we feel. And you've also heard of the attack on minorities, the attack on the press. So you get a sense of what is going on.
Where are the numbers? Where are the actual numbers to back those claims? Will an intelligence officer actually call you on your phone saying you're being listened into and you have a recording of that conversation? Some questions that are being asked. Can you point at somebody sitting in the audience and mark them out from their ethnicity, from their background and say you are in danger in the country? Do you have the numbers to back it? And there's criticism on that way too, on that route too. But is there a continuum? Is what Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar had to say, that there is a continuum, bit by bit, look at it from a larger perspective and a continuum basis? January, the BBC documentary comes. February, George Soros makes his comments, and March, it is Rahul Gandhi. So is this targeting of the Modi government from abroad? is this a reality? Now, California in 2017, this is what he had to say. He said RSS and PM are fiddling with the foundational structure of India. So this was said by Rahul Gandhi. At that point in time, the targeting happened in Singapore in 2018. He went ahead to say some people are using anger and violence to win elections. In Germany also in 2018, Modi government's exclusionary politics has created a platform for hate. So it's been going on, what Mr. Rahul Gandhi has been saying over the years. It's been the same repetition of the same point of view or perspective, as the Congress party would call it. This is what Sardar R.P. Singh has tweeted just a short while ago when I said certain references were made. I take strong objection to Rahul Gandhi pointing toward a Sikh youth at Cambridge University and saying that Sikhs are treated in India as second-class citizens. This rhetoric is coming from a leader whose father and grandmother were involved in the killing of more than 30,000 Sikhs in Punjab and Delhi. Isn't that an irony? Now, what Mr. Rahul Gandhi has said, is it fact or is it fiction? Let's go straight into the face-off. We have Mr. Amit Malviya, IT cell head of the BJP and also its national spokesperson. And we also have Mr. Tehseen Poonawalla, Congress-leaning political analyst. Namaste, Jai Hind, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. And before we get into the debate, Tehseen Poonawalla, congratulations on parenthood. Welcome to parenthood. And let's hope it's a nice and pleasurable experience for you. So congratulations there. But now let's get into the debate. What Mr. Rahul Gandhi has said, Mr. Amit Malviya or Amit ji, is it true or is it all nothing but fiction? Khayali pulao.
Aaron, this isn't the first time when Rahul Gandhi has gone on foreign soil and has berated India. It would have perhaps made sense if what he said was substantiated or had a ground to stand on. Let me just pick on a few things that he said and demolish them one after the other. He spoke about the Pegasus software, and he was therefore implying that India is a surveillance state. Now, the Supreme Court appointed committee sought 29 phones, and they found that the software or the Pegasus traces were not in any one of them. Now, if Rahul Gandhi did really have a concern, he should have handed over his handset to the forensic experts and allowed them to check if indeed Pegasus was used. Now, this allegation, although bereft of any merit, is also devious in the sense that it has been raised at a point when India is hosting the members of G20. And let me remind your viewers that the last time he raised the Pegasus issue was just before an important parliamentary session. So the question is that is Rahul Gandhi speaking for somebody and raising these contentious issues which are devoid of any facts and have been settled by the highest court of the land only to distract from the real issue and to distract from India's rising stature in the world.
Right. Now,
the second point,
Jay,
he spoke about minorities and minorities being under attack. I want to remind Rahul Gandhi that the day he was speaking this fallacy in United Kingdom, Nagaland and Meghalaya, two states which are minority dominated, 85 to 90% Christian and tribals, voted for the BJP-led coalition. In fact, the Congress drew a blank in Nagaland and they have been reduced to a partly sum in Meghalaya. Now, you can make all sorts of allegations, and clearly the Congress and the assorted opposition has been making these allegations since 2014, whether it was the church attack, lynching, the beef controversy. They were all manufactured controversies to try and paint the BJP and RSS as not being benign as far as the minorities is concerned, where the truth is completely to the contrary.
Right.
The Modi government has made no difference between people as far as governance is concerned, and the biggest beneficiaries, if I may say, of the welfare programs, along with the OBCs and the Dalits, have been the minorities, because they were the ones who were majorly deprived.
One of the issues or pain point I have with the ruling disposition, that's the government, is that they have not yet bothered to define who minorities are. There is no benchmark to define minorities. Somebody who are 18 to 20% of the country's population, can they be minorities? This game of minorities, what happens to those who are linguistic minorities? What happens to their benefits? So this government has fallen short as far as actually defining minorities properly and doing good as far as ethnic and linguistic minorities, and minorities is a state subject because the minorities are different. In 9 states and union territories in our country today, Hindus are minorities, but they've got no rights in these states and or minority benefits. So that's a pain point with the current disposition in terms of minority benefits. Very different point of view from what Mr. Rahul Gandhi would be alluding to. Another thing, Amit Malviya, what the Supreme Court note said, on the basis of detailed examination and analysis, it is concluded that 5 out of the 29 phones may have had some infection due to a malware or poor cyber hygiene, and the data available is limited to reach a conclusion that such an anomaly is due to Pegasus, despite efforts for months using scientific methods. So they found malware in 5 of the 29 phones, but it was not Pegasus. The other thing this committee said is that the government did not cooperate. Their position remained the same as it was with the Supreme Court. So that's also another thing. The third thing, Amit Malviya ji, criticizing Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the BJP and the RSS is not equal to taking an anti-India position. It's very convenient to link the two. I can criticize the Prime Minister, that doesn't make me anti-India.
Well, let me take the points one by one.
Ji.
The first point on what is a minority. You're absolutely right that the term minority needs to be defined more specifically. And you're again right when you say that it's a state subject. And in fact, linguistic minorities constitute what defines minority. But in parlance, in political parlance, the word minority has come to signify Muslims. So Christians in this country are never referred to as minorities, unfortunately, neither are Jains, or for that matter, Sikhs. So this is a politically convenient euphemism for the word Muslim. So if I take the cue, Rahul Gandhi always and specifically speaks only about Muslims because they make a big vote block and the Congress would want them in their committee. The second point is about the observation of the Supreme Court, and I can't disagree with you on that particular matter. And thirdly, is the criticism of the Prime Minister and the government akin to criticizing the nation? Of course it isn't. But when Rahul Gandhi makes these allegations on a foreign soil on a matter that has been completely settled by the Supreme Court, when he lies, I don't even want to use the word economical with truth, he's in fact lying to his audience when he talks about Pegasus, then it does raise question that why such issues are raised at critical times, like when India is hosting the G20, when India is just about to start an important parliamentary session. So is Rahul Gandhi a prop in the hands of the foreign powers? Okay, and I will just give you one example, Anand. Let me finish this. This is an important point. In his speech in Cambridge, Rahul Gandhi, in fact, justified the Chinese authoritarianism. He says that they owe their harmony to society and not to individual liberty, like is the case in the United States. And he further goes on to say it's because he wants order, because they have had civil wars and strikes and so on and so forth. So now, Anand, just bear with me for 30 seconds. This is the same Rahul Gandhi who's enjoyed the Chinese hospitality in Beijing, has received donation in the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation.
Those are all matter of record. Those are all matter of record. And Amitji, you can draw your political inference to that. But to say that this is what America respects and this is what China respects, this is America's perspective, this is China's perspective. So the point of view can also be that he has just come out and said this is how Americans think, this is how the Chinese think, this is the liberal democratic way and this is the Chinese communist way. And this is what works in these two places. He has stopped from there. He has not said that I like this or I like that. He's just compared the two. So
let me clarify, please. He's gone on to say that it is justified. He uses that phrase.
No, from China's point of view, from China's point of view, what China is doing is justified for them can be another inference.
But
please hold your view. Please, okay, you made your point of view. Now, Tehseen Pulawala, thank you for your patience and come in. How many elements of fact have been presented by Mr. Rahul Gandhi when he's made all these claims? And is that not a cause for concern? Please, go ahead. Tehseen, you're on mute, please. You're on mute, please. I have not done anything. My team has not done anything. So please don't allude to say you muted my voice.
No,
That's not the case. Now I can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. No, I won't say that you will stifle my voice, because for everyone I know, you would stand up for my voice to speak. So thank you, Anand, and namaskar to you and to your audience. 2 or 3 very important points. I just want to clarify on the first pertinent point that Mr. Malviya referred to, which was the speech in Cambridge. Mr. Gandhi starts his speech by saying that I will speak about Bharat Jodo and an Indian model, an American model, which you rightly said is a liberal democratic model, and a Chinese model. So he's comparing 2 models out there. So to say he's liking one model over the other is absolutely unjustified. I just wish the speech could have been heard completely. For the record, Cambridge sticks up that Rahul Gandhi studied in that university. We know leaders who've gone to court to hide their degrees. Let's come to the larger points of Pegasus, which Mr. Malviya has been very critical about. Like Anand, you pointed out rightly, the most honorable court has said that this government did not cooperate with a Supreme Court appointed committee on Pegasus. It did not cooperate. And the 5 mobiles out of the 29 in which malware was found could have been Pegasus, could not have been Pegasus. We don't know because the government did not cooperate. So why was the government not interested in cooperating with the Supreme Court when army generals, judges of the Supreme Court, opposition leaders and ministers were alleged that their phones have been tapped or not tapped? If the government had nothing to hide, they should have gone ahead and cooperated. The government did not cooperate, hence we could not reach a conclusion. Point number 1. Point number 2, on the minorities. Mr. Malviya is right, and so are you, on the definition of minorities. I was the one who fought on the minority rights in the most honorable Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that a law needs to come out with regards to this violence. It actually praised the law, the draft law that I put in. Do you know what happened, Anand, after that? Mr. Malviya is right, it's a state subject. The most honorable Home Minister Amit Shah got up in Parliament on a Supreme Court judgment in my case and said, we will not bring in this law. Opposition states that brought in the law, the governor till date hasn't signed it. Rajasthan, West Bengal, Jharkhand. But even further, I went to the Home Secretary, and like you said, to define minorities and to define lynching, we defined it and we said minorities could be a Hindu in Delhi from Karnataka who can't speak Hindi. Could be a linguistic minority. We've defined it in our draft law. The Supreme Court has said we must have this law. The government of India is not passing it, not allowing state governments to pass it. This is their commitment to what they say. They say one thing on TV, they come on another thing. On the last issue that Mr. Malviya raised, Nagaland, I absolutely respect and congratulate Mr. Malviya and his party for a phenomenal victory in Nagaland. But Mr. Malviya is a representative of this government or somebody who speaks for the BJP. In 2016-17, the most honorable Prime Minister promised each one of us that the Nagaland Accord would be made public in a matter of a few days. This accord, as is being said by those who are said to be insurgents in Nagaland, gives Nagaland a separate constitution, a separate parliament, and a separate flag. Even before this present election, the insurgents said we will allow, please look at the wording, we will allow elections to happen because the government has given in to our demand. The government never comments on that. Mr. Malviya, I am very happy you removed 370 from Kashmir. Why isn't the government giving me what is it signed with the Naga insurgents?
Okay.
I would
so you have made
one last point.
Okay.
Just one last point.
Okay.
Just one last point.
Yeah.
I absolutely respect Prime Minister Modi. He's my Prime Minister. But I did not like it when Prime Minister Modi went abroad and said, before he became Prime Minister, and I quote him, people were unhappy that they were born in India. They would curse their luck that they were born in India, and they said they want to leave India. I did not like it when my Prime Minister said that मैं पिछले 60 साल का कूड़ा, I was cleaning the garbage for 60 years before he became Prime Minister. I did not like my Prime Minister insulting him. He's on a constitutional post. He said that abroad. But I won't call him an anti-national.
But here is where Tehseen Poonawalla, one or two aspects before Mr. Amit Malviya responds to you. When you claim that your phone has Pegasus, you have to give your phone for it to be searched. How many people gave their phone, including the person who alleged that he had phone? The other thing is, will an intelligence officer ever call you on your phone and say your phone that I am calling you to warn you is tapped? So where is that phone call and who's that intelligence officer? The other thing, the point is, please hear me out. Claims it's very easy to claim things, but you can't prove things. You have not backed your claims with proof. The court very clearly said, and the panel very clearly said that the malware found in these phones is not Pegasus, despite months of scientific experiments. That's only 5 out of 29 phones. The remaining phones did not have anything in them. So please, let's not misconstrue what happened. The government did not cooperate, that's one point. But the panel went and explored all the phones that were submitted, only 29 were submitted. That did not include the power phone made by Mr. Rao. The other thing is, Mr. Rahul Gandhi points at a Sikh at a time when Amritpal Singh is fanning Khalistani flames and says, you are not safe, you are a second-class citizen. On what basis has he said that? Please show me once when the Prime Minister has come out and said that Muslims and Sikhs in our country are second-class citizens. There's no single time that the Prime Minister said that. Mr. Rahul Gandhi stood there in Cambridge and said, this Prime Minister says you are second-class citizen. Show me the proof, sir. If you don't have the proof, as a Congress MP, as a Lok Sabha MP, as an elected representative, you are being irresponsible if you cannot back your statements with facts. You can't make loose statements like this when you know the world is watching you as an Indian standing there. That's my humble point of view representation, and you can say, please go back and scour any time where you have seen the Prime Minister, who himself lived 2 years as a Sikh. He will come down and call Sikhs second-class citizens. Sir, you have to say something which I will believe. No, I am an educated person. I can see this one. As an Indian citizen, I am asking this question. But Mr. Amit Malviya, respond to Tehseen Poonawalla. I'll just park my observations.
Sure.
But Tehseen Poonawalla says you have been vague or opaque on what you have promised on Nagaland. Don't claim victory where you have made compromises, and you do not walk the talk. Some allegations there. Yes.
Look, first of all, I completely reject everything that Tehseen has said about the Naga Peace Accord. In fact, the Government of India is in advanced talks and negotiations with the Naga people, and the kind of development that the state has seen has been the reason why Nagaland has voted for the BJP-led alliance in such a large number. I do not know where Tehseen gets his facts from, or for that matter, where the entire Congress party gets these facts from. They see things that the government has never said, and they hear things that the government never meant. But be as it may, the proof of the pudding is how legitimate the people think your promises and your claims are. And just going by the number, and particularly the Congress draws a big zero in Nagaland, clearly people don't believe anything that you are saying. That is the final proof in a democratic setup. So the Congress needs to reflect on that. When Rahul Gandhi goes abroad and makes sweeping statements that minorities are not safe, he is just brazenly indulging in appeasement politics because there is nothing to suggest that there is any systemic bias or there is any systemic attempt to undermine the minorities. In fact, under the Modi administration, the minorities have done exceedingly well. And I want to make a few very obvious but relevant points. The only state where minorities enjoy great affluence is Gujarat. The BJP has been in power for almost 3 decades there. The state where minorities, and when I say minorities, I mean Muslims, because that is exactly what the Congress and Rahul Gandhi mean. The state in which they have the worst condition is West Bengal. The BJP has never been in power in West Bengal for the last 75 years that we've been independent. So clearly, if the minorities are in a pitiable condition, it is the Congress and the
my humble request going forward. Tehseen Poonawalla, I'll give you one minute to rebut, because I have to be fair on this face-off. The aspect is, ladies and gentlemen, the polity of today, the government of today over the last 8 years has not bothered to define who minorities are. They need to do it.
Yes.
And the leaders of today need to stop using the word minority and secular for the political lexicon that they conveniently use. Let them define who this minority is. What do they mean by minority? Are they saying Muslims? Are Muslims really minority in this country, or are they the second largest majority? Are Parsis minority? Are Tulu minority? Are Sikhs minority? Define it, sir, so that we are very clear. Let's define it, please. And that's the responsibility of the government that's in power today. But Tehseen Poonawalla, respond. Factless allegations.
Right. I think Mr. Malviya, before I fact check Mr. Malviya hasn't responded to one thing. When the most honorable Prime Minister abroad as Prime Minister said Indians were not proud to be Indians before he became Prime Minister. I know Mr. Malviya was proud, I can speak for him, to be Indian always. I know you, Anand, were, I know I was. Why was the Prime Minister bluffing? Or he said he was cleaning the kachra of this country. Mr. Malviya asked me, where did I get my knowledge about the Naga Peace Accord from? From the NSCIN their peace accord with the Prime Minister signed on August 5th. If they've signed it, why is the government still negotiating? Where they clearly state on record, and this is on all news channels, including yours, Anand, where they say that the government of India has recognized our sovereignty over Nagaland. Everything that's over land in Nagaland belongs to the people of Naga. And they go on to define it, something that's in debate. I won't want to get into that debate. Now let's come to the most pertinent point. I have a right to criticize my Prime Minister. I think it's my duty to criticize my Prime Minister because that is what being a good Indian is about. I must show my Prime Minister where my Prime Minister is erring. So I don't think criticizing the Prime Minister should be looked at in a matter that
here is a problem. I am running out of time, so that's why. Yes,
Sir, please,
yeah, quickly. Okay, I'll give you another 20 seconds, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now the BJP's argument, why do you criticize the Prime Minister abroad? The answer to that is your show is watched all across the world. People are going to watch it. If the Prime Minister is doing something that isn't right, it is our duty
back it with facts. My simple point is, sir, when 30%...
2,25,000. I'm backing it with facts, sir.
No.
Just allow me 10 seconds
to
finish.
Yeah, tell me.
2,25,000 Indians, the highest ever last year, gave up the Indian passport. It's the toughest thing to do. And they might
Indian citizens. One minute. India. No. That has got nothing to do with how ethnic communities, castes, everybody or people across segments of society are treated in this country. If people choose to go abroad, they are making that choice. Nobody is asking them, putting a gun to their head and asking them. No. Don't ask why. Don't deflect. Tessin, you're deflecting. My simple point is, sir. Please. My simple point is, sir. Mr. Rahul, don't shout over me, Tessin. I've given you fair point. Let's not do that. Please, let's not do that. Mr. Rahul Gandhi, show me one statement of fact that he's made or one statement that he's made which is backed with hard numbers or facts. If he's done that, we'll put it out here. If he's not done that, then henceforth he must. Because he can't just shoot and scoot or make the same allegations again and again without having facts behind them to back it. That's my humble submission. Amit Malviya and Tehseen Poonawalla, thank you very, very much. We're going to take a very, very short break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we turn the spotlight towards the bulldozers that are running, that are cracking down on the mafia Raj. Not just Atiq Ahmed, but Mukhtar Ansari's kith and kin too.
See, let's understand one thing. The executive has basically some unofficial coalition partners that everybody knows of. And not just that, I gave a very good example of the Enforcement Directorate that there is a massive gap in raids and the number of convictions that are happening. These kind of things are to be taken care of. And who ensures justice in India? It is the Supreme Court. It is the Constitution. That is the law of the land. It is the Supreme Court that safeguards it.
No.
So let's
all of that point well taken.
I'll
ask Ishkaran this. I think, if you were to take an apples to apples comparison, if the judiciary says in the interest of transparency, we need to be, or at least one of our members needs to be part of the committee that decides who's going to be the Chief Election Commissioner, then why can't the executive turn around and say that we need to have one representative in the interest of transparency and fairness on the appointment of judges?
Zaka, we can have a two form of debate. One is legally under constitutional scheme. The other is a political debate. For political debate, I think is not the appropriate forum, or the BJP has to do it. But legally and constitutionally, let's deal with it. Not only that, in practice, what will happen with this sort of an election commission appointment system, likelihood of the government and the opposition, whosoever be in power, is very rare that they will agree. So effectively, the casting vote now would be with the Chief Justice, whosoever be the Chief Justice. We can be talking 5 down the line also. So that in a constitutional scheme of things and separation of power, is that the wisest course of action? Philosophically, everybody wants transparency. Everybody knows election commission should be a very transparent, strong body. But what is the best method? But the other question is also there, that if the parliament is not willing to legislate, they still have the choice to legislate, right? End of the day, they are the affected party. But if they don't legislate, they have no option but to follow the law of the land. So the onus is squarely on the parliament or the government, which has the parliamentary majority. Do they bring in a law? And then we can discuss it, because as things stand today, why this? The logical consequence of this could also be tomorrow. It could go on to how is a governor appointed? Should the governor, who is in an opposition state, be appointed merely by executive, or should there be a panel? So there is no end to that logical, it can happen 5 years down the line.
Yeah. But the court said that chief election commissioners and election commissioners have to be appointed on the aid and advice of a panel. That panel will comprise the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India. When there is no Leader of the Lok Sabha, then the Leader of the single largest opposition party will play that part. The appointment will be done by the President of India. Now, while the court did say that this will continue to hold good till the law is passed, it is still seen as a setback for the centre, because the court also added that election commissioner's appointment needs to be insulated from executive interference. Now, the centre had expectedly opposed this petition. This is what the centre's contention was, that judiciary cannot interfere in the selection of CEC and ECs. Inclusion of CJI in the process would amount to judicial overreach. Inclusion is in violation of separation of powers. The court can quash appointment if unqualified person is chosen. The presumption that inclusion of judiciary would bring in fairness is wholly flawed. Now, let me go across to both our guests, Ishkaran Mandari, lawyer and political analyst, Ashpreet Karyal, Congress Party spokesperson, joining us. Ishkaran, why do you consider this order today to be flawed? Because if you can choose, CBI directors and Central Vigilance Commissioners basis the same committee recommendation, which many are saying would be fair and transparent because it has one representative of the government, one representative of the opposition, and a neutral arbiter in the CJI, that should be a fair system, shouldn't it?
Zaka, I never said that the order is flawed per se. What I have said is that there are various ways of having transparency. Is the only way of transparency the presence of a Supreme Court judge or the CJI? That is the larger philosophical question in our constitutional scheme of things. Because, of course, while we are talking about a transparent process, and we have had certain election commissioners like Mr. M.S. Gill, who was an election commissioner and then a member of Congress and then a minister in the cabinet. But what is the form of transparency and how should that transparency come about? One of the most important paragraphs of the judgment, which has the committee itself, the Supreme Court says that the parliament, this will hold good till parliament by law brings out a suitable system. And I think if the government wants to, it anyways had the power, but the judgment itself recognizes that power, and they should bring out an appropriate law of how they think of insulating election commissioners, irrespective of whose government is in power, so that going forward, we have a transparent system. And if the political class wants the system to be dealt by with itself, whether it be civil society, whether it be
Back on the right stand with the spotlight turned towards Uttar Pradesh, where the bulldozers are at work. UP government versus mafia continues. The crackdown has been on for 3 days now. So who all have been facing Yogi's bulldozer action? The bulldozer action this day was against Maskuddin, whose house is on GT Road in Ahmedpur in Prayagraj. UP authorities have demolished Safdar Ali's house in Chakia in Prayagraj, and the house of Atiq's aide Khalid Zafar has also been bulldozed. Maskuddin is an accused in a shootout case. Safdar Ali is said to be the owner of a gun store, and he's said to be Atiq's aide, and he provided the weapons for that daylight murder of Umesh Pal. Khalid Zafar, this property is worth about 2.5 crores and officials say it was built without completing formalities. Maskuddin is said to be the financier of Don Atiq Ahmed. The property value of the house is around 3 crore rupees and there has been litigation regarding the illegal building since 2020. It was Khalid Zafar's house where Atiq's wife Shaista Parveen and Atiq's son also lived. But is there a headway in the Umesh Pal murder probe? Doesn't seem so. 7 days later, the story remains the same. 13 accused involved in the Umesh Pal murder, but only 6 identified. And the prime accused in the case, Atiq Ahmed's son Asad, who was caught on camera, is still at large. He's desperately trying to surrender, but the STF wants to catch him before he surrenders in court. So Atiq's son is absconding. Then Asad, that is his name, Sabir is absconding, Guddu Muslim is absconding, Ghulam is absconding, Arman is absconding, and Arbaz, the only one who's killed in the encounter. The person who provided the car, he is also now under arrest. More news coming through. Pak economic crisis worsens day by day. Moody's has now further downgraded ratings of 5 major Pakistani banks. Moody's has downgraded the 5 banks' long-term foreign currency counterparty risk ratings to CAA3 from CAA1. The banks are Allied Bank Limited, Habib Bank Limited, MCB Bank Limited, National Bank of Pakistan and the United Bank Limited. Moody's has lowered the 5 banks' baseline credit assessments to CAA3 from CAA1, and as a result also downgraded their local currency long-term or CRRs to CAA2 from B3, and their long-term counterparty risk assessments to CAA2, and this is from B3. The agency says the outlook on all banks' long-term bank deposit ratings has been changed to stable from negative. Moody's in a statement has said that the deterioration in Pakistan's operating environment reflects both the rising government liquidity and external vulnerability risks, with foreign exchange reserves declining to critically low levels, as well as the high costs of living, with headline inflation likely to rise further as energy prices increase in tandem with the removal of energy subsidies. And that doesn't end in Pakistan. Well, more news coming through. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has made a big announcement. He said he's ready to talk with army chief on broader interest of the country. In a meeting with journalists, Imran said that the country's conditions are not good and the way the government is dealing, only God can save Pakistan. Imran further said that he's ready to talk with the army chief. If no one talks now, what should I do now? Giving a stern warning to the army, Imran said if someone wants him to kneel down, it is not possible. Imran said that General Qamar Javed Bajwa stabbed him in the back and he should be court-martialed for his speech against Imran's Russia visit. Well, we get a move on, ladies and gentlemen. The Indian Army released photos of soldiers playing cricket in eastern Ladakh, where the two nations have been locked in a tense military standoff since May 2020. The Patiala Brigade of the Trishul Division organized a cricket competition for Indian Army soldiers in extremely high altitude, and these areas are sub-zero temperatures. This comes just a day after External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar shook hands with his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang in New Delhi on the sidelines of the G20 summit, calling the relations between the two nations as abnormal. So clearly, our soldiers proving a point there at such high altitudes, they're ready to play cricket. So you can only understand or expect their training, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the message going out. We're playing cricket on our turf and we will engage with you on our terms, keeping the interests of Bharat paramount. With that, we call it a wrap on this edition of The Right Stand, taking a very, very short break. Brass tacks on the other side.
Tomorrow, it could go on to how is the governor appointed? Should the governor who is in an opposition state be appointed merely by executive, or should there be a panel? So there is no end to that logical, it can happen 5 years down the line.
But the court said that chief election commissioners and election commissioners have to be appointed on the aid and advice of a panel. That panel will comprise the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India. When there is no Leader of the Lok Sabha, then the Leader of the single largest opposition party will play that part. The appointment will be done by the President of India. Now, while the court did say that this will continue to hold good till the law is passed, it is still seen as a setback for the centre, because the court also added that election commissioner's appointment needs to be insulated from executive interference. Now, the centre had expectedly opposed this petition. This is what the centre's contention was, that judiciary cannot interfere in the selection of CEC and ECs. Inclusion of CJI in the process would amount to judicial overreach. Inclusion is in violation of separation of powers. The court can quash appointment if unqualified person is chosen. The presumption that inclusion of judiciary would bring in fairness is wholly flawed. Now, let me go across to both our guests, Ishkaran Mandari, lawyer and political analyst, Ashpreet Karyal, Congress Party spokesperson, joining us. Ishkaran, why do you consider this order today to be flawed? Because if you can choose CBI directors and Central Vigilance Commissioners basis the same committee recommendation, which many are saying would be fair and transparent because it has one representative of the government, one representative of the opposition, and a neutral arbiter in the CJI, that should be a fair system, shouldn't it?
Zaka, I never said that the order is flawed per se. What I have said is that there are various ways of having transparency. Is the only way of transparency the presence of a Supreme Court judge or the CJI? That is the larger philosophical question in our constitutional scheme of things. Because, of course, while we are talking about a transparent process, and we have
Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. Rahul Gandhi, in a lecture in Cambridge, says that his phones are tapped, there is Pegasus on his phone, and most importantly, he says this government under Narendra Modi is anti-democratic. It is suffocating the democracy of India. Now, here is the thing, that this whole matter of Pegasus had gone up to no less than the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court had asked all of these leaders, including Mr. Gandhi, to submit their phones for inspection. Mr. Gandhi chose not to, for whatever reason he did. And now, after the Supreme Court has dismissed that case, Mr. Gandhi says that democracy in India is under siege under Narendra Modi. The question is, this is a closed chapter. This is a chapter that was opened up by the Supreme Court, no less. And Mr. Gandhi, among other opposition leaders, chose not to give their phones for inspection to the Supreme Court. Now, to revive this whole debate about an intolerant India, a government that does not brook any criticism, how justified or how valid is that? And that too, coming at a time when India is hosting the G20 foreign ministers meeting and the NDA has secured substantial majorities and governments in the 3 northeastern states that went to polls just recently. But first, the story.
Negotiation that is actually coming under attack and under threat. We've also heard of the attack on minorities, the attack on the press.
Congress MP Rahul Gandhi's pointed attack on the Modi government. Weeks after completing his Bharat Jodo Yatra, Rahul Gandhi landed up at Cambridge University, claiming that democracy is under attack in India.
Here you can see that picture. That picture is taken in front of Parliament House. And that's where a whole bunch of opposition members of Parliament were just standing there talking about certain issues, and we were just locked up and put in jail. And that's happened 3 or 4 times, right? And it's happened relatively violently.
Rahul Gandhi also alleged that Israeli spyware Pegasus was being used to snoop into the phones of several political leaders, including him.
Large number of politicians have Pegasus on their phone.